Welcome to the Ecom Breakthrough Podcast. Are you ready to unlock the full potential and growth in your business? You've already crossed 7 figures in sales, but the challenge is knowing how to take your business to the next level. Join Josh Hadley, an 8-figure Ecom business owner and investor, as he interviews highly successful business owners. Get ready, because you're going to learn specific actions you can take today to help your business reach its full potential and leave a lasting impact on the world.
Welcome to the Ecom Breakthrough Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Hadley, where I interview the top business leaders in e-commerce. Past guests include Kevin King, Steve Simonson, and Stephen Pope. Today, I'm speaking with Brian Johnson, the co-founder of Canopy Management, and we will be talking a lot about Amazon advertising and product optimization. This episode is brought to you by Ecom Breakthrough Consulting, where I help 7-figure companies grow to 8 figures and beyond. Listen, Brian, I started Hadley Designs in 2015, and I grew it to an 8-figure brand in 7 years. I made a lot of mistakes along the way that made the path of getting to 8 figures take a little bit longer. At times, I doubted whether our business could even survive or become a real brand. And I wish I would have had a guide to help me grow faster and avoid a lot of the stumbling blocks I ran into. If you've hit a similar plateau and want to know the next steps to take your business to the next level, then go to ecommbreakthrough.com. That's Ecomm with 2 M's to learn more. And as a special bonus to my podcast listeners, this month I'm giving away one $10,000 comprehensive business strategy audit session at no cost. All you need to do is email me at josh@ecommbreakthrough.com with the subject line strategy audit and plead your case as to why we should choose you as the strategy audit that we should select for the month. And if you don't win this month, don't worry, because you'll be entered for future months to come. Today, I'm super excited to introduce you all to Brian Johnson. Brian has served as a leader in online advertising and conversion rate strategy for nearly 2 decades. He's a trusted partner to tens of thousands of brands across the globe, and Brian's work has earned him a reputation as a disruptive force in a world brimming with new and interesting challenges. Through his advertising agency, Canopy Management, as well as his highly successful Amazon advertising consultancy, community, training, and software, Brian has helped over 25,000 brands increase sales by over $2 billion on Amazon through advertising strategy, conversion rate optimization, and differentiation. The results his products and services deliver continue to put him in high demand with companies both large and small around the world. So with that introduction, Brian, I want to welcome you to the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, when you put it together like that whole like here's your career in a bottle, and so it's like, man, that sounds like a lot of work.
Sounds like you've been around the block a few times too, Brian.
Just a few, yeah. Just going around in circles. Yeah.
Hey, no, doing great things. Well, and Brian, one thing that isn't in that bio, you know, you and I have worked together. You were one of the partners I hired to run our PPC back in, what was it, 2018, I want to say. Yeah, right? Is that when
right? Yeah,
started, right?
Yeah, you were in the first, I don't know, you were probably like...
I think I was one of the first few clients.
Yeah.
So I watched Canopy Management grow up, and watching you guys do amazing things has been incredible. And you guys took off a huge load off my shoulders when it was just my wife and I. And man, we have 1,300 products now, and you know that's no small feat advertising that many different products.
But I mean, the credit absolutely goes to you and your wife. You know, you just are a driving force as far as like rolling out new products on a regular basis and being as creative and innovative as you've been. So, yeah, well done on that.
Well, thank you, Brian. And again, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. And I know our listeners are going to be excited to hear from you because, again, across 25,000 different brands, you've been able to look under the hood of numerous Amazon businesses to see what's working, what's not working. You've worked with huge multinational, conglomerates, so to speak. And then you've also worked with small, guys that just started like me on Amazon that were just kind of figuring things out as we go, that bootstrap their business.
Right.
And so I would love for you to share some of those strategies, with our audience that you see working and how brands stay relevant today. But before we get into all of that, Brian, why don't you give everybody just a little bit of background of like, how did you gain all of your experience to what led you ultimately to Canopy and what you're doing now? And I think what ultimately led to the success you guys are experiencing.
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent a number of years in the Fortune 500 world for various companies, and there was always that strong pull of that entrepreneur pull, right? And I was always moonlighting, always doing something on the weekend. I was never the case study of the kid that would be selling candy, on the playground, in school. I wasn't that bad, but I probably had something similar that I was trying to do. But I had finally jumped over out of corporate into entrepreneurship, painfully at times, it's been 15 years now. And so I jumped over into sourcing products locally from business going out of business auctions and various liquidation sites and everything. And I spent about 7 years on Amazon. I'm sorry, not on Amazon, on eBay, sourcing and then reselling products. And then I started sourcing and reselling for multiple brands money counting equipment, like banking equipment, coin sorters and fraud detectors and cash counters and that kind of stuff. And probably one of I think it was probably like my last year, maybe, I had a number of units, a number of cash machines that I had in-house. Most of the time I was just drop shipping, but in-house I had one that I had AMC Studios in New Mexico call me up one day and said, like, hey, we're shooting tomorrow. We want a black money counter for the show we're shooting. I said, oh, which one? It's like, you've never heard of it before. It's a new show called Breaking Bad. And I'm like, I love Breaking Bad. And they're like, you've heard of us? Because this was the beginning of season 2. And so lo and behold is that they went ahead and they paid more for overnight FedEx shipping of this money counter equipment so that they could have it in, I think it's like season 2, episode 10 or something like that, when they had like a black money counter. Okay. I had shipped that to them literally overnight so that they could have it. I mean, that's what you call just-in-time sourcing right there. But that wrapped up probably my last year before I got the call over to Amazon. Within the next couple of years, I got pulled over and realized I was a fish out of water. Didn't have a clue what I was doing. And I had jumped into, at the same time as I think it was like Amazing Selling Machine 2. Okay. And they had, so it was still pretty early on. Some friends of mine that I'd known in e-commerce had pulled me over to the Amazon side. Yeah, this is great. I'm like going, it's like, what, for Kindles and books? I didn't have a clue back then. This was back in 2014. And so I had learned enough to source and bring to market my own product. It was like a kitchen tool. And I go to the Amazing Selling Machine 2 live event in Austin, Texas. And I'm sitting there in the audience, and there's probably, 500 to 1,000. I've got no idea how many people were actually there, but I'm sitting there in the audience, and Jason Fladian gets up on stage, and of course, he's dynamic. In 2014, it was full on Wild West on Amazon.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and he goes, you could just go in there. It's like you can go into any niche you want, and everybody's got a broken listing, and they don't have enough images, and it's like garbage photography, and you can just easily just walk in there and do a better job. And he started showing examples of a few niches. Like, here's a few examples. You could just easily, anybody in here could just walk in and just take over that niche. And of course, one of the screens he brought up was my direct competitor. Within 2 months, I had 30 new competitors. Clearly, not a whole lot of creative people in that room. And so I really, that's when I started actually innovating. I think that was that was probably the first instance where I started innovating from within the Amazon space. And so I had added on something like a cleaning brush accessory, and then within 6 months, everybody in that niche had that same cleaning brush. So I realized, like, okay, innovation is creativity and innovation in the Amazon space, you got to keep moving. You can't just go like, cool, I did it. I'm protected. Good to go. It doesn't work that way. Somebody's always going to come after you with it. So I had, at the same time, this was kind of the catalyst to what I've accomplished now. And that is, I had a buddy of mine who does very well on Amazon. In fact, he told me this week that him and his wife are being they've got Amazon themselves. Amazon corporate is actually flying out to them in Arizona in order to interview them for a success story of selling on Amazon, which is pretty cool, right? And then, of course, they've been on, a number of things like, Today shows and that kind of stuff. But when I had first started consulting, which in other words is I knew 5 minutes more than what they did as far as marketing on Amazon, which was very little back then. And the problem was that they had a beauty brand that had 800 SKUs on Amazon. Back in 2014, 800 SKUs on Amazon. And they're like going, yeah, Brian, if you could just go ahead and run this channel, like figure out how to grow the sales on this. Again, complete fish out of water, right? I had to learn fast, learn that I wanted to learn it, and I started making a dent in it, but I realized I could move faster if I could just do the advertising. So let me figure out the advertising. All right, cool. Where's the training for advertising? Crickets, nothing. Amazon didn't even have anything. Okay, well, there's got to be people talking about it. Nobody's talking about it. No groups, no community. Software? No. Training? No. Okay, fine. That's what led me just out of my own personal need. I'm like, okay, well, let me start out and just create a Facebook group, and I'll invite some people on there, and we'll get 20, 30 of us in there, and we'll mastermind together about advertising. That was the start of the Amazon PPC troubleshooting group that has it's 22,000 people, I think, just in that group alone right now.
Okay.
And so it's grown, regardless of what I've done. But I was always the type of person that anytime somebody asked a question, if I knew the answer, okay, I'm gonna reply. Well, it turns out that was a trap because people would start asking questions that I didn't have the answer for. But I was determined, as the moderator of the group, I was determined to figure out what the answer was. So I went out and I figured out the answer. I spent my own money doing tests and everything until I figured out the answer. And the more answers that you provide, the more that they start relying on you for all the answers. And the more people come in, the more repetitive, the bigger the questions come, the harder they come. But I always had the habit of okay, I can solve this. I'll figure it out. I'll get an answer. I'll get the correct answer. So that paved the way as far as the reputation, I guess, of being, kind of the answer guy when it came to Amazon advertising, because by then I was starting to do more research and more testing than probably most any other seller was doing. And it just kept snowballing, right? And it got to the point where, because they're always expecting you to have the answer, you can never not have the answer. And so that's the trap, right? So after a while, I said, okay, well, I'm trying to manage 800 SKUs for this beauty brand for my friend on advertising. And it sucks because I'm spending 10, 12 hours, a week at least going through and trying to manage, all the, the minimal ad reports that were available and trying to figure out what's working and making changes. Let me create some software. You just upload your report and it spits out some new information, says, here's what's working, here's what's not. And that exploded because there wasn't anything else on the market. Celix was coming online at the time also, but we grew in the first couple of years, or the first year, we had, I think, a little over 6,500 users who were using this version. And it was just horrific. There's a statement in business of if you're not embarrassed by your first launch, by your first version, then you got to market too late. And so that was absolutely the case. It was embarrassing. It worked better than what Amazon offered, but it was still ugly. By today's standard, it was a joke. It was the equivalent of, never mind. It's insignificant compared to what's available today. that software, that was what became PPC Scope. PPC Scope ran until this past summer when I sold it off actually a little over a year ago, and then they shut it down this summer just because it just wasn't a good fit for their business model. But it was interesting to have that run. It was probably, a good 6-year run with that software. During that time, to kind of evolve to the next thing, which ended up becoming what we call Sponsored Products Academy, which is the course that we did 3 different versions on. That's when I met Brian Burt, who would go on to become my partner in Sponsored Products Academy and then subsequently into Canopy Management, of which he's the CEO now. And he had hunted around and asked people, it's like, okay, who knows what they're talking about in PPC? Apparently people kept pointing back to me. So he said, okay, fine, I'll just hire you for, whatever my rate was at the time, which I think was like $55, for like a half an hour.
So cheap.
Very cheap. And he kind of laughed at the end because I was telling him everything that he needed, more than he needed to know about his own advertising. And he realized that, like, you got way too much stuff in your head. We need to turn this into something that you can monetize, into a course. And so apparently what was in my head was 4 weeks worth of training on advertising, as it turns out. And so, yeah, we did quite well with that. Again, that was another blue ocean. Software was blue ocean, where there wasn't competition. The course was blue ocean. Nobody had, any kind of a major course out yet. And we definitely didn't have a blue ocean when we finally decided 4.5 years ago to launch the agency, Canopy Management. But we felt like, okay, we've already gone through, we've done everything else. I've got software, we've got training, we've got all the formula. And that's when we launched Canopy Management. And I think you had made a comment earlier that resonated well with me, in that I'm not gonna repeat it because I'm not gonna paraphrase it, but the idea that your first year is, and periodically throughout your career and whatever business you have, it can be a train wreck at times. And I have no idea to this day how you stuck with us that first year, given how many problems we had that first year, just the growing pains and just trying to document all of our processes and get consistency down and all of our rules and strategies and everything. It was kind of a nightmare the first year, that we finally, after the first year, after we went through this EO coaching, right? That's what helped us survive the first year. We really did not think, I did not think we were going to survive. Neither one of us thought we were going to survive, until we went through the training with Charfin. And that absolutely turned us around, got us to focus in on what was going to create consistency for our clients and our processes, SOPs, who knew? Yeah. And it didn't matter how smart that people, or I thought that I was in my own head as far as strategy. If you can't have somebody else execute on it, it's useless. And so the training wasn't enough. We had to have the processes. But once we got the processes down and then we started bulletproofing that process over time through experience, we finally got to the point where it's like, okay, we can deliver consistent results across our clients. And you, like you said earlier, is that you've seen us growing up from infancy, including the terrible twos, to what we've become today. I'm proud to say that I was glad that you stuck with us, for so long.
Well, you helped to take a large, plate off my shoulders, because managing PPC was a beast for me. And again, it was just my wife and I at the time. And so, it has been fun watching you guys grow as we went through that. But ultimately, I think I was one of the people in your earlier group, right? As you were talking about, you had kind of built this community, you had right. Your training platform. I remember looking for like PPC related like training courses there at the time. This was probably back in like 2016. There was not a lot out there. 2016, 2017. And like yours was like the only one that I kept like getting pointed to. And so similarly, I remember this is going back to the time when the only way you could get the sponsored brand image at the top of the page was if you got into Vendor Central, right?
Right. Yeah.
And that was like your hack. And I was like, this guy's genius, right? And I think it was probably like maybe like 6 months after that when they started like rolling that out to, you know, the third party sellers and stuff like that. But I remember that's where kind of I was like, oh, this guy's super smart. But you know your stuff when it comes to Amazon advertising, and now you've gotten even more breadth of knowledge with optimization and all of that stuff. So I would really love to dive in to maybe some case studies, but ideally knowing that our audience are, you know, 7-figure sellers, or they've already established some success on Amazon. You've seen both small and huge brands, right? Some brands with like an unlimited budget come to you, say, just dominate everything for me. Yeah. So one of the questions I want to ask you, Brian, is like, what would be your recommendation and advice for, you know, a 7-figure seller that wants to continue to grow to 8 figures and beyond? What should they be doing now as it relates to advertising specifically, with Amazon just getting more and more competitive every day?
I used to always answer with advertising because that was my subject matter expertise, right? But then when I started getting really passionate about buyer behavior and conversion rate optimization and buyer psychology and differentiation and some of these kind of concepts, I realized that was that was the prerequisite to advertising. Even for brands that are already heavily advertising, it's like, we don't need to do all that kind of stuff because we're already selling. But you're in an environment where the ad costs continue to go up. It continues to get more expensive in order to maintain what you're doing. You're starting to see where the relationship between your ad cost and your total sales is continuing to increase rather than decrease like you want it to. And you're always fighting against competition that is continually adapting. They're continually pivoting. They're either emulating you, or they're emulating somebody next to you. And because of that, the emulation model that is commonly taught among courses in the Amazon space, plus a lot of the tools that say, hey, here's who's successful, just do what they do. And frankly, there's a high portion of sellers that simply, it's like, yeah, this is a side business for me, or this is a startup. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel and try to be creative. I'm just going to copy what works out there. And there might be a certain amount of laziness in there, but more than likely, they simply just don't have the self-confidence to say, hey, I'm going to break out on my own and do something different, boldly go, where nobody else is.
Yeah.
Right? But without a doubt, I can walk into any niche on Amazon and immediately see what are the weaknesses, the gaps of the brands that are competing in that same space, and know how to exploit that. It sounds kind of like a bad thing, but how to take advantage of their mistakes and in connecting with their target audience, and actually do put the things in place that are correct in order to speak to their target audience, to get their attention, catch the eye of the shopper, to pull in their interest through things like the image and the title in order to pull them through to the product listing, in order to pull them away from a lot of that competition.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in the listing itself is to answer the key questions that gets them to nod their head saying, yes, I want that, I want that, I want that. Ultimately, they're going to make a purchase decision. That has the effect of sometimes dramatically, but certainly on a regular basis, increases the conversion rate for the product. Not only the visibility, the sessions, the traffic going to a product, but also the conversion rate. That combination obviously creates a lot more sales, and the profitability allows you to either become profitable in your advertising or even more aggressive in your advertising if you choose to do so. It is, I would say that probably when you transition from being a 7-figure seller up to an 8-figure, 9-figure seller, is when you're starting to transition away from here is, basic campaign structure and basic like tactics when it comes to the product or seller central or vendor central. When you move into the 8-figure, 9-figure, you start getting into the organizational challenges that you're trying to solve. You're trying to solve for, logistical bottlenecks, your, staffing problems, all the things that, that you and I have talked about as far as that Sharfen teaches, as far as like going to the next level, and each level becomes a ceiling that you've got to solve everything underneath it before you can break through to the next level. And most brands, they may have got a great product and a great catalog, but they have to solve a number of things as leaders and with their leadership team and how their whole team operates in order to get to the next level, to break through. And so certainly for those who are still trying to maximize everything about their product and their seller central account and everything, their catalog, always start with revisiting, can you differentiate your, I know you can, but it's kind of a rhetorical question, but can you differentiate your product from the rest of your competitors for that search and give shoppers a reason to be curious or compelled to come through your product listing? Usually that's benefit or feature driven. And then, of course, answer the question, what's in it for me, multiple times on your product listing so that they understand instantly, not through a long, reading a long, text block or making them figure it out, but just handing it to them. What's in it for me in order to, if I buy this product? That is the by far the greatest impact that I have seen when it comes to sales and profitability in the Amazon space.
Very interesting. And I think that necessarily wasn't going to be the answer I was expecting to hear. And I don't think it's the strategy or tips that people are like, oh, I want the newest hack. Right. And you're like, well, no, you got to be creative, and it's kind of going back to the basics. But like you said, it is a prerequisite. What I would love to do, Brian, is, are there any case studies that come to your mind, or maybe just some examples of like, let's dive into that, like differentiation. Like, can you give us a few different niches and just like hypotheticals, even if we don't have case studies, to say, hey, like this is how to approach, differentiation. Because I think that this is important too, as people establish their brands and maybe as they look to get into new product categories, right? And extend their product line. You mentioned that you can look at different product niches or, categories on Amazon. You're like, I already know which ones are the prime for picking, right? So can you kind of break that down for us to help kind of the audience maybe glean some of the insights that you have to where you can pinpoint like, ooh, this one's prime for disruption?
Well, I mean, honestly, every niche within Amazon is prime for disruption. Unfortunately, I've gotten I've built up the bad habit is that I look at most things in my life and look for, what's in it for me? What's the standout differentiation? I'm driving down the highway looking at billboards with the same mentality that I am looking at a niche on Amazon. And so it kind of gets, a little obsessive maybe, but ultimately I am looking at from starting out with, because ultimately there's going to be the, what we call it as far as the differentiation, the conversion rate optimization side of the product listing, which most brands haven't done in the last 6 months. They probably haven't done it since they first launched the product, right? Which would be a huge mistake. There's still some people out there who still believe if they change something in their title that they'll lose all of their ranking and indexing and everything. It's a very dated concern. But when it comes to, so you've got the differentiation and conversion rate optimization of products. And then, of course, how do you get your traffic? Whether that is advertising on Amazon, whether you're driving TikTok traffic from outside of Amazon, whether you've got, social media sites that are pushing through micro affiliate, micro influencers and these kinds of things, right? All of these things are valid and they have their time of consideration. But ultimately, you're on the platform that has a higher average conversion rate than any other channel available out there, including probably your own D2C site. And so it does carry fees that go along with that, but if you lean harder into maximizing the conversion rate on Amazon, you're going to learn a lot of things that you can use outside of Amazon as well. In addition to when you first identify, hey, I'm going to bring a new product to market, how am I going to, the first thought is not can we bring this to market, but how are we going to market this once we put it into market? Because we have to be able to stand out from the competition. Some examples on this is it could be as simple as if there's a common pattern that occurs among the search results. Let's say you take your favorite search term or your one that converts the most for your product, and you look at the search results that come back. There's usually a couple of things that come up. First one's going to be, are the products that Amazon chooses to bring back to the shopper for that search term, are they all similar? Are they similar to your product? Second one, or is it a mix of other products that just happen to use the same search term? So there's a matter of relevance there. The second one is going to be, are they going to bring back products that are a similar price point to you? If you're coming in and you've got a $200 product and everybody else has a $50 product and Amazon's primarily just showing the $20 to $50 products, and then you're kind of this outlier trying to fit into with a $200 product, you're either going to stand out very well or you're going to be just ignored just out of sheer just like miss as far as relevance, as far as your target audience. So that's something that I highly encourage brands to do, is to take their top 20 search terms and actually search on Amazon to see how would their product look among whatever comes back, whatever Amazon thinks is relevant to that search term. That'll tell you where Amazon is trying to, where they think is the buying target audience. They're going to bring back the products they think are going to convert the best. The third thing is the patterns. There are going to be common patterns. This is what I was talking about as far as emulation. So an example on this is like one of them that I'll reference again and again is let's take shoes, for instance. Just a couple up here. So in the case of shoes, it is very common for brands in every niche in order to create their main image, and it's usually a single product, and it is just flat right there. In other words, there's no depth, there's no product, and then a foot back, there's another product kind of off in the distance, maybe a little bokeh, right? A little bit of blur in the background, maybe. There's no color splash. They're not at an angle. It's not tilted up. It's just flat, sideways, right up in front, right? Filling up as much white space as possible. There's no character to that main image. If most of your competitors in the shoe results are using the same kind of main image, the same footprint, if you will, where the shoe, they're all pointing to the left, they're all pointing, they're flat, they're turned completely sideways, 90 degrees to the viewer, they're all pointing in the same direction, white background. It's pretty easy for you to simply just try to go the opposite, point the opposite direction. Tilt your shoe up, have an angle, have the second shoe off in the background at a distance, just to create some depth in there. There's so many tricks. I actually went so far, because I am that level of geek, is I've actually gone out and done thousands of studies of buyer choices, where think of it similar to the process like, say, PickFu might use in order to take an audience and say, give them, okay, here's image A, here's image B, which one's your favorite? Yeah. Not an accurate A-B split test, but it does have some value, right? So same kind of thing that I did on other platforms is simply just, it was a little simpler than that. It was more about the human eye and which product did you notice first? And it was just like, a whole series of images. For instance, which product did you notice first? Which one did you notice second? Why? And did that thousands of times. And there was common patterns that we learned that this simply just draws the human eye on a page like that, the result page, first, second, third. First one was always motion. So that was never really a consideration in the Amazon space, because, of course, the only thing with motion would have been the sponsored brand video ad, and that's below the fold. Not now. Now you can get a video up in headline ads. if you've got it, grab it, do it. Because that's the first thing that people notice is motion. The second thing that grabs their attention is a bright, high contrast pop of color. Bright red, blue, green, yellow, whatever. That kind of color pop when it is among a lack of that color. In other words, if everybody's got a red product, yours being red is not going to be noticed. But if everybody's black and you've got a black product, but you put a red apple in there, or you've got a red box behind it, or some kind of accent behind, some blue, accessory or something like that behind it that creates an additional color pop in the image, it just naturally draws the eye of the shopper. So that's kind of the shoe example of how did we get more people to stop their scroll on their mobile phone, right? In order to stop for a split second to look at the image and therefore then look at the title. And then we use the title in order to hook them over to the listing. The another one that is that grabs people's eyes is clean versus clutter. Think of like kitchen. Think of like kitchen pots and pans, right? You got a set of like 3 frying pans and 3 pots and ladles and lids and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
it is very common for brands to want to force value all the way up front on the main image by saying, oh, well, here's our main product, but then we have these 12 accessories that go along with it. I'm going to cram all of that into my main image, and it's all going to be just dense packed in there on the main image. And look at all the value we're giving you. And somebody has enough sales where they make, create success, and then everybody else emulates that. Not a whole lot of originality there.
So true. So true. I'm going to piggyback off of that and let you continue, because we saw that in one of the most recent product opportunities that we went into. We said, wow, look at everything all these people are trying to provide. There's we're including 10,000 markers, plus we're including 10,000 stickers. And all of a sudden, what's funny is somebody initially started doing that, and then everybody just started copying. And my wife and I, as we looked at that kind of opportunity, we were like, holy smokes, this is just overwhelming and just filled with clutter. And so what we did is we actually took out sorry, you're not getting 10,000 stickers. Sorry, you're not getting a bunch of markers. You're getting one, right? And you're getting one of each of these things, but it's exactly what you need. And instead of just customer feeling overwhelmed, it's that is exactly what I want. And so it's just very clean, and you see so many better results from that because it's a lot less pressure on the customer's mind to have to think, wow, what am I looking at, and trying to dissect what all is being included here. So anyways, I'll let you go back to it, but just want to give that a second.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because part of it is back in the day, you and I certainly remember back when, they used to teach as far as put an ebook on your listing to differentiate, so you stand out. And of course, nobody cared about an ebook, right?
Yeah.
But there's always this one, extra value. And I think that kind of, if you sell, a kitchen tool, have a cleaning brush or a case or something like that, right? A stand for it. And I think that just continued to perpetuate more and more and more until people are going to think, well, I got to have everything on there to show value. But from a shopper, there's a couple of rules that we typically have regarding conversion rate optimization. That is the introducing confusion or introducing doubt is going to slow down the buying process, the decision process of a shopper, and that's going to slow down or even inhibit them buying the product, because if they're confused, they don't buy. If they have doubt, they don't buy, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why, low-hanging fruit of if you've got bad English, misspellings throughout your listings, that slows down the buyer. A slowing buyer is not going to purchase. If you have too many variations, we see this a lot in, say, a baby niche, for instance, like baby bibs, and they've got different patterns and sayings and colors and sizes and quantity packages, and then everybody's got a different design because it's oh, well, I don't like those designs. I'm going to come up with my own. And then imagine the results of baby bibs on Amazon. You can do that search. And everybody is like, here's all these different, here's 15 different designs and 12 sizes. And if you click into listings, here's 19 more variations, child variations of those thing combinations. And you're just so overwhelming the consumer that they get into this paralysis by analysis where they can't make a decision because there's too many options in front of them. So I love what you did there. It's like instead of 10,000, we're going to be like, what do you actually want? What do you actually need, right? It's not to say that you can't offer that value within the listing. But in a situation where all your competition is pushing this cluttered main image and it's just rows and rows of cluttered main images, be the one that has this massive amount of white space. It sticks out like a sore thumb, just as if you had a red background, a white background is going to pop to a consumer who's just overwhelmed with too much information all around. Yours is going to stand out. And then maybe in your secondary image, you can say like, oh, and you know what? We're also going to throw in these other things.
Yeah.
Okay. But you got to catch their attention first before you can get them to appreciate the value within your listing later.
Yeah.
So I think those are a couple of good examples that I like to use because it's there's similar patterns like that occur, throughout just in the main image that occur in every single niche where it's easy to simply just do the opposite of what everybody else is doing and what most your competitors are doing in order to grab the attention of the shopper first before everybody else. That's that whole click share metric from brand analytics.
Makes sense. Yeah. Hey, that's a lot of value that you just shared there. I'm also curious, going back to the variation question there, or point that you pointed out, that sometimes too many variations is that analysis by paralysis, right? Yeah. And then the customer just leaves. You might think you're like, oh, look, I've got 20 different designs for you to choose from. This is great, right? And it's like, no, probably not. So have you found a magical number for like variations on a listing that you would recommend?
Well, it can't simply just be a different flavor of the day, right? I think that you and your wife mastered this in that you came out with different, actual different designs. Yours came off a lot more custom, even though you had some patterns that you repeated in different ways. You didn't simply just say like, oh, we're going to do a white and an eggshell and a light gray and these kind of like subtle variations of things. It was more of no, this is modern, this is rustic, this is substantially different options to choose from. Generally, I would say is don't simply just add on variations thinking you're going to just multiply sales. If I've got a black one, then I'm going to add on a red, a blue, a green, a black, a white color, whatever. What are the most popular colors? And only do those, right? And only do like the top 3. It would be better to bring in a new product that has something actually unique about it than to simply just add on color variations. Size variations, quantity variations, you can leverage those in different ways. Things like, gloves, shoes, clothes, whatever the case is, size variations is very common. You would bundle those together underneath the same listing so that if somebody goes in and says, okay, here's the red shoe I want. Oh, and here's all the different sizes, men's and women's, whatever. That makes sense to keep together as a variation.
Right.
But everything else, truly different designs, you should look for the earliest opportunity where it can stand on its own from a social proof standpoint, review count standpoint, in order to break it out to be a separate listing, because that's when you get the advantage that actually Vendor Central accounts currently get. This is something relatively new, and that is the ability to have multiple product listings, multiple ads running in the same space, the same real estate for the same search result. You can have multiple ones. I'm sure you've seen this where you go into a niche and somebody just has dominated the ad space and the organic space with multiple products. The way they do that is those are standalone products or separate parent products. Those are not child products unless they are a Vendor Central account. Then they get that benefit now. But the variations, what we typically see on that is because of that paralysis by analysis, they don't make the choice. You would think the logic is usually like, well, I'll have, if I add in 10 more variations, 10 more, different styles, flavors, then I'll have 10 chances of getting the same customer. No, actually, you'll simply just confuse them because all the rest of your competitors have confused them because of a lack of focus, a lack of commitment to a decision. And what you end up with is single-digit conversion rates, which is a death wish for any product line on Amazon. It's not uncommon for us to see among clothing. I keep on using like the baby clothing, baby bibs, baby onesies, all that kind of stuff. That I have all these different flavors and styles and all that kind of stuff. It's not uncommon for those to come in at like a 3 to 5% conversion rate, which is horrific for a product to have.
Right.
If you're not up in the 20% plus conversion rate, it's because you don't know who your audience is.
Interesting. So let's go into that then real briefly then, Brian. Like, how do you optimize for conversion rate? How do you get to that 20% conversion rate mark?
We've got, 4 hours? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Here's the short workshop. No, so the biggest thing, the easiest, well, I shouldn't say the easiest to implement because I take it for granted because I do it all day. I do it with billboards, for crying out loud. I mean, is to go in and look at what is it, first and foremost, what is it, what's the common pattern among what your competitors are selling, and how do you break apart from that? How do you do something different? A second thing on that is what is it about your product that is actually has a different benefit or a different feature than your competitors? This is where a lot of brands get hung up because they're like, look, we source the exact same product as most of my manufacturers from the same factory, same mold, same materials, same color, same everything. I'm just selling it too, right? It's a Me Too product. Or the one I always love is like, I was the first one here. Everybody else copied me. Cool. You're the innovator. Time to innovate again. Time to pivot. Even in situations like this, the easiest low-hanging fruit is your competitors are failing to point out obvious features and benefits to the consumer in the product listings simply because they know too much about their own product line. They know that everybody in the same niche has the same feature, has the same benefit. And so they fail to point it out to a shopper because they just assumed everybody already knows. I assure you they don't. And so even if you come in and you, like I've got a couple of questions that I always have brands take back to their manufacturer. And some of the responses I've heard have been hilarious. But the two questions that I have them ask their manufacturer is, in the manufacturing process of my product, what is the most expensive step and what is the most time-consuming step and why for each of those? It's not that you paid more or asked to have extra time spent. It's just, and you just said, I want this product, and then they just solved for you without even telling you at the manufacturing level that, oh, this one thing took longer or this one thing is a more expensive ingredient or part or process. What you'll find in that is they'll explain something to you like, oh, well, we have to, it takes, the most time consuming is that we have to put this plastic mold into this oven in order to bake in the color for an extended period of time. And that takes the most. Well, why do you do that? It's like, oh, well, so it doesn't fade when it's sitting out in the sun. Oh, nobody's pointing out the fact that it resists sun fading. That it can stand the weather. It's weather resistant. Even though everybody experiences the same benefit because it was made by the same manufacturer, they all have the same benefit. Nobody else is pointing out that to the consumer as, oh, guess what? Here's a feature. Here's a benefit. And when a consumer sees that you point this thing out, they don't know that everybody's got that, but they do see that you seem to be the only one that is pointing it out. Therefore, you must be different. You must have something unique. This is as simple as it takes oftentimes for us to, because like at Canopy, we're always like saying like, we're not in the business of like having you discount your product. We want you to increase the price of your product and to demand more for your product because you've got more exclusivity. You stand out from the competition. The advertising works better, yada, right? And so this is a way that you can actually increase your price above. It's like, and I can hear the voices like, I've got competitors who sell my product for $8. Stop competing against them. Find these things that separate, either understand better than them what the pain is that you're solving for a consumer, and put it in a language that a consumer understands in simplistic terms. Replace things like industry acronyms with a couple of words that actually explains what it does, what's the benefit. One that I use on that is there's an industry code for fire resistance called UL94. And products that are fire resistant, they love to, because it's nice and short, it's only 4 letters, they put it in their title, UL94, UL94. First of all, nobody's searching for UL94. Second, anybody searching for that product probably has no clue what UL94 is. But it's time to put in fire resistant. All of a sudden you're like going, wow, this one's fire resistant.
The other ones aren't.
Because they're all fire resistant.
Yep.
But you used language that they actually understood. It's how politicians get elected, right?
Yeah. Brian, I want you to continue on that thought. I'm going to interject here because I think I don't remember there was a beer company, and you might know this, right? That what they changed in their marketing is that they said that their beer was filtered, right? I think that's the correct thing, right? Where their beer is the exact same, went through the exact same process as everybody else, right? Yep. And that is the differentiating factor, is like they just went through that thought process of like, all right, what's the most expensive step, or what takes the longest amount of time? And they're like, oh, we spend a lot of time filtering. Let's call out that our beer is filtered. And so at that time, nobody else was calling out that our beer was filtered, whether that was important or called out, and it differentiated them. And I think there's a lot. I mean, I've already had a big mindset shift with that, like with some of my products, that one thing that we can do is like, there's a lot of like hand tooling time that takes, a lot of like hand craftsmanship for some of our products. Yeah. It's like, why don't we say that this is actually handcrafted? Like each one gets, we can market that, and instead of just looking at the standard competition and just looking at like, oh, what does everybody say about planners, right? Well, our planner has 1,000 pages. Mine has 1,001 pages, or things like that. That's the basic stuff. Like what I love those questions that you talked about, and it can make such an impact. So I'll let you continue going down that path, but I want the audience to know, like, this is a huge mindset shift. And we haven't had any podcast guest on thus far that's ever talked about something as simple as this when it comes to product optimization, that I think genuinely is like a true miss right now in the industry. It's a huge opportunity, because I can guarantee you that, but I wasn't just being cheeky when I said like I can walk into any niche on Amazon and immediately see the opportunities. That is a true statement, because your competitors, they don't understand the buyer psychology. They're not taking the time to consider the buyer psychology. In fact, you're probably even going up against some brands that have 1,000 SKUs, and they don't have the time, the resources in order to even go through that process. But you can, right? If you truly are passionate about the audience that you're serving. I'll probably mention it a little bit later on as far as review analysis. That's a whole additional topic that goes into that. But those examples, those are just a couple of 20 different, 30 different ways that you can make small improvements to how well that your product, catches somebody's eyes, compels them or interests them, hooks them, I call it, to pull them into your product listing just from what's in your first 75 characters of your title. And then the listing itself, 100% is that yes, you can point out benefits. And I pointed out a couple of examples here as far as like, how do you come up with a benefit or a feature that makes my product appear to be unique? Now, you brought up a very good point, and that is,
my competitors don't do this currently. And that is, yes, they will adapt. When they see your success, they will emulate you, and you'll need to continue to innovate. So just plan on every 6 months going back, looking at your niche and saying, like, do I still stand out, or do I need to pivot a little bit? Do I need to adapt? And it's okay for you to do that, because you're always the one leading the way, taking advantage of that change. On the listing itself, absolute no question. You can have as much text as you want, as much images, videos, whatever the case is. But if you're not answering right near the top in the secondary images, in the bullet points, in the A+ content, it's going to show up differently depending on what device that you're on anyway. So you might as well do it to all of these, is lead with the first 3 things that you state. The first 3 features or benefits that you state in a secondary image, or the first 3 bullet points, or the first, row of images on A+ content or something, is you're quickly answering, what's in it for me if I buy this product? What's the benefit to me as the consumer? Keep it simple in language. Don't go over flowery, and tell a story and, haiku and all that kind of stuff. It's more of a case of, you're simply just saying, like, in 5 to 8 words, here's the benefit, and then follow that, chase that with another, maybe the rest of the bullet points, for instance, here's the feature or features that create this benefit for you. And if they're unique, point out that, they're unique as well. Those are the things that you're trying to get the shopper to say, I want that, I want that, I want that. At that point, you've got your customer. Before that, if you're making them work, if you're making them read through and you're telling your story and you're talking about stuff they don't care, like we donate 5% to the blah, blah, blah organization, they don't care. What they care about is, when I get this product, it sounds selfish, but it works from a conversion rate standpoint, which is what you're trying to do. And that is just hand it to them. Here is the pain that we're going to solve, or here's the thing that's going to solve your pain. Here's the benefit to you. Here's how we're going to do it. Certain niches, certain categories have some other requirements to, like beauty, for instance, requires things like brand pedigree to be mentioned, or that kind of stuff. And that's a different topic there. But in general, the what's in it for me is absolutely the number one. I won't say the easiest thing to implement, but the number one biggest impact on conversion rate is coming in quickly with some very succinct, really easy to read and understand within 5 seconds. What's the benefit to me? Number 1, number 2, number 3.
I love it. Brian, we could go on for the next 4 hours. Let's just keep it going. At least, yeah. I got you booked for the next 4 hours, right? Is that not what the calendar said? No, Brian, I mean, man, what a wealth of knowledge. This has been amazing. I myself, I've followed your stuff, and I'm like, I know this guy pretty well, but already, like, I've been sitting here taking a bunch of notes and sending my team some information here, because this has been a gold mine of information. So I think our listeners, you need to go back and hit rewind a few times here. Brian, before I ask you the final 3 questions, I always ask our guests, I do love to leave the audience with 3 actionable takeaways from each episode. So here are 3 takeaways that I noted, Brian. Let me know if you think I'm missing something.
Okay.
But number 1, you got to think of your brand and your products as, how am I going to innovate or differentiate my product listing? Yeah. Long gone are the days of creating Me Too products and saying, hey, the spatula niche looks awesome on Amazon. I'll just go create another spatula. Now, if you can come up with a brand new type of spatula that nobody's ever seen before, that's where the innovation is required. And I think that people need to get comfortable in innovating all the time. So my action item here for our listeners is also kind of a mindset shift of, like, Amazon and e-commerce in general is not a passive income stream. Because as you mentioned, you might have come out with a new and innovative product, right? Now, if you can get a design patent or a utility patent on it. That's one thing. But 6 months down the road, you're going to have people knocking you off no matter what. So you need to continue to innovate. This is not a set it and forget it strategy. So I think that that's kind of action item number one, is like always be innovating. You can't just set it and forget it.
Right.
Action item number two is you need to go into those top search terms for your particular product and do the top 20 search terms and actually look at the listings, see what Amazon is pulling up. And you need to just evaluate, do my listings just blend in with the sea of everybody else? Because if they do, you need to continue to innovate there. I think that's, you mentioned like looking for patterns and trying to be, how do you stand out, right?
You break that pattern with your own product. Yeah.
Yeah. And you used some great examples there, right? With the shoes or having a red background, or in the case of an oversaturation of content, maybe the white clean background will make a big difference.
Yeah, I don't always say red background. It could be just like a red box that's in the background, a foot behind the, so there's so it's not breaking in terms of service by having, it's like, oh, that's not a white background. I want to hear it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we'll clarify that.
Red background.
Everybody's like, wait, did Brian just say we could add red backgrounds? No.
No, Amazon will tell you.
Thinking of how you can innovate, though, within the terms of service, right, for your product listings, okay? Breaking that pattern. And then third, last but not least, is think about what's in it for me for the end customer. When you come up with your copy, when you come up with your secondary images, if you don't have that thought process in mind of what's in it for me, and your first couple bullets and your title and the first two images of your listing don't immediately answer, like, how is the customer going to resolve their pain point from purchasing this product, then you're going to lose. Because at the end of the day, there was a Harvard Business study. It goes back to Wendy's was trying to understand why most of their Frosty purchases were being done actually in the morning, contrary to belief. Like they were trying to figure out, like, why are so many Frosties being purchased in the morning? What they found out is they actually interviewed their customers, right? And they're like, why are you buying this Frosty in the morning? What they found out is that people were doing it to kind of pass the time by while they were sitting in traffic, and their Frosty was a good consistency where it didn't go away too quick like a drink, right? But it wasn't too chunky and it was easy to sip on and still pay attention to the road. Right. And so, Wendy's doubled down on kind of the thickness of their Frosty because they understood that, they're kind of using this to kind of pass the time by. It's clean. So that's what I mean by, like, even Wendy's is doing that, and it changed the way that they kind of formulated their product. That's the same thing that we need to be doing and understanding, like, what is the customer hiring or purchasing our product to solve, because they're solving something in their life, whether it's boredom or whether it's, to not forget something, or who knows what it is, but you can understand that. And I think that goes into reviews, and you can dive deeper there with customers. So I think there could be, go ahead, Brian, what else?
Into the Wendy's thing. So I also, and this actually is apropos because in part because I don't think, I've got an example here, but I want to show an example where Wendy's actually failed also.
All right.
And the reason for that is because I don't want people to think it's like, oh, well, I'm not Wendy's. I don't have, some pedigree of education, Ivy League, all that kind of stuff, right? None of that. It is a matter of, like, if you assume that every person, every company is going to make mistakes, it's your job within your environment, within your product niche, within your competitive set, to simply identify where did they stumble, where did they make a mistake, and where can I put my best foot forward. That's part of the differentiation, the standing out. The example that I kind of bring up on that is that was brilliant for Wendy's to figure that out. Now, I like Wendy's. One of my local Wendy's restaurants nearby during the summer, in the evening, I would go in there and I'd stick my head in the door and say, "Are you guys open?" Like, "Yeah, of course we're open." I can't tell because it's pitch black on the outside. Corporate makes us tint the windows to keep the air conditioning costs down. You guys look closed. That's why there's one car in the drive-thru. And they're like, "Yeah, corporate doesn't allow us to change that." We actually the managers of that restaurant actually put in an open neon sign, and corporate made them take it down because it didn't fit. It didn't conform. But they had these really dark windows in order to save against the Texas heat, to reduce the cost of air conditioning. And yet they were killing their business by half in the evening because people didn't even think that they were open. Look dark inside. So those are kind of the things that you can, if you observe it, jump on it. you know? If you're a competitor, jump all over it.
Yeah, you build the McDonald's next to Wendy's, and you're like, "Well, we're open, right?"
Well, Texas, of course, we've got Whataburger, and Whataburger is right next to Wendy's. Whataburger's got a line going around the block, 2 lanes.
Yep.
But they also are like shining, like, "We're open for the next county to see."
So true. I love that. That's a great. I'm glad that you added that in there. I think that's a great point. All right, Brian. So let's dive into the last final questions here. What's been the most influential book that you've read, and why?
I've got a number of them that I'm reading right now. To narrow it down, I'm still going to lean into Never Split the Difference from Chris Voss.
Okay.
That one I just keep coming back to because there's some really just brilliant nuggets about human psychology in there. There's other things like influence and some other books that are related to that, to human psychology, that I enjoy. That's probably the one that I would recommend from a business standpoint is Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
Awesome. That's a great recommendation. Question number 2 is, what is one of your favorite productivity tools or newest software that you've been utilizing? Maybe it's a new software tool that many people don't know about that you'd recommend other people dive into.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways because I know that myself and my team, we've got a number of tools either that we've built in-house or that we use that are publicly available. And they're commonly used and they're popular, and for good reason, for product competitive research, these kinds of things. But there's usually in a lot of these tools, there's different ways of using the same data so that you're not doing the same thing as everybody else is doing. But I will say from a tool that I would say is underutilized that I strongly believe in, especially when it comes to the differentiation and standing out, is reviewmonitoring.com. They're currently rebranding to reviews.ai, I believe. And reviewmonitoring.com is a bulk Amazon product review analysis tool. Goes 10 times beyond what I've seen with other review analysis tools. It's because it'll go in and it'll show you not simply like you, because in other words, you can tie it in so that you're looking at your own product reviews, you're looking at all your competitive product reviews, and what it's looking for is what are the common patterns from a sentiment standpoint. They're in a good mood, they're in a bad mood, they rated it low, they rated it high. What are the individual words that came up or individual phrases that came up most frequently when they were speaking negative about their purchase? And it goes in and it really highlights what are some common keywords, and then allows you to like, okay, stem this out, it kind of like the spider web out that shows like, oh, here's the other words that are connected to this common phrase that keeps coming up in negative reviews or positive reviews. What that allows you to do is it allows you to look in bulk at your niche and say, what are the pain points that people are talking about? What are people praising about products in my niche? What are people complaining about? And then you can use that information in order to emphasize the benefits and features of your own product or mitigate any kind of negativity that you might experience with your own product simply by understanding what other products are people looking at and what other reviews are kind of telling the story of what the shopper's experience is. I would love to have that extend out to social media platforms. Anytime a product is mentioned, what is the sentiment that goes along with that?
Oh, for real.
As far as I know, it doesn't exist. I keep on saying I'm going to build that someday, and I haven't. But from an Amazon standpoint, reviewmonitoring.com, I'm not an affiliate for. I wish I had a percentage of that company as much as I like talking about it, but I'm a fan, and I do use that to really dig into who my target audience is and what their pain points are that I can address in my product listings.
Awesome. That's a great tool. I haven't used that one before, but that's definitely one sounds very valuable. I know exactly how we would use that in our business, and it goes right along with everything that you just talked about today, being able to understand the customer so much better and differentiate and focus on the what's in it for me. So thanks for sharing that with us. Last but not least, Brian, who is somebody that you admire or respect the most in the e-commerce space that you think people should be paying attention to?
Oh, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of OGs in the market. There's a lot of up and coming. I will fully admit is one of my character flaws that I had more so in the past was believing everything that I said that was said about me and getting my, I had, get a big head, big ego. And there were a couple of times in the past where I was shut down somebody who's new and up and coming that I should have shown more respect to, but didn't. And that was just, a character flaw of my own ego at the time. I think I've outgrown that, but I'm human. But so I don't necessarily, in other words, my point of that is not to dismiss anybody who's up and coming, trying to get the knowledge, trying to put out the knowledge. If there's just saying bad stuff, yes, I'm going to call them out on it. But, I need to, I take a second look now. Even if I have my doubts, I take a second look and try to get a better perspective. Right. But I would say that the ones that I feel like I just embrace the messaging and really try to absorb it and use it, that I've met personally a couple of times and I know has done very well. It's actually a couple. You actually may know them as well. They used to be in Austin. Now they're in Vegas. Alex and Layla Hormozi. It's Hormosi, I believe, is Hormozi. They did. They used to have probably still do actually, the Gym Launch brand. They were entrepreneurs that figured out a system for making the typically unprofitable gym membership become profitable and a business model that actually works, which is very uncommon among gyms and martial arts studios and all that kind of stuff. But the amount I've seen them grow over the years, and they've just become more and more brilliant the more success that they've had, and they've got great hearts and they're willing to share it. I know Alex, for instance, has a YouTube channel where he'll talk about some of the things, and then of course his wife Layla is a brilliant person to listen to, especially for those who are in the 8, 9, 10-figure businesses. Layla Hormozi is no question. I would make sure that you're plugging into what she's teaching.
Awesome. I definitely recommend Alex Hormozi, and I've heard him speak in the past as well. And yeah, he drops a lot of brilliance everywhere he goes and everywhere he speaks. So I second that. And I also know his book. I think it's $1 Million Offers, right? Is the book?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, awesome. But his wife Layla is, if you're up above the, like I said, the 8, 9 figure business, Layla has some pearls of wisdom that you've got to catch. So
good input. Well, thank you, Brian. Brian, last thing, I know you have kind of a free gift that you want to leave with our audience. If they want to learn more about your services, where do they find you? Go ahead and tell everybody about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say is that from the agency standpoint, from Canopy Management, one of the things that we can offer is we've gotten really good about, we do a hand audit in other words, a manual process audit of an Amazon seller account. And we'll come in and we'll tell that brand, okay, here's what you're doing right. Here's what you're doing wrong. Here's where your growth path, your potential sales and profitability should be at. And here's how you need to get there. And that's something that we do. It is a model that we use in hopes that you'll look at us and say like, oh, wow, you guys really know what you're doing. The depth that you went into, you guys clearly know the strategy and the path that needs to be done. I'll just hire you guys to do it, as you did, Josh, right? Yeah. But if it doesn't turn into that, and it's something that it's very common for us to provide that kind of an audit. They say, like, cool, thanks for the information. They may choose somebody else. A year later, they come right back. So we know that, there's a lifetime value of simply providing that kind of, value to people within our community and their brands. And so that is something that we can offer, certainly for your listeners, is to just go out to canopymanagement.com and just ask for that strategy session.
Awesome. And where can people follow you, Brian?
You know what? So I'm on social media. I'm not currently, I'm done for 2022 as far as the speaking stage goes. So I'm not doing any, obviously I think yours is actually probably the last one that I'm doing, even from an online, podcast kind of standpoint too. So I'm going to take the rest of the year off. So
well deserved.
Yeah, but I would say that certainly the most common way. I mean, I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can look up Canopy Management or Brian R. Johnson on LinkedIn, for instance, and reach out to me there. I'm in multiple places. I've got a YouTube channel that hasn't been updated in a while, but it still has some great content on it. Or frankly, if you want to just email me at brian@canopymanagement.com, I'll receive it.
Easy enough.
So,
well, Brian, thanks so much for joining us today. You've dropped a lot of knowledge with us all. And so I encourage our listeners to go follow you and check out your stuff moving forward. But thanks for joining us today.
Glad to be here. I had a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. Visit ecombreakthrough.com for more information. If you've enjoyed today's episode, the best way you can show your appreciation is by clicking the subscribe button and quickly leaving a review. See you again next time.